Today, we are going to be conducting a very careful examination of an extremely serious and truly tragic event. We're looking at the 2017 murder of Sydney Loofe.
It is a difficult topic.
Mhm.
It received a huge amount of national attention, and I think our commitment here has to be a fact-based exploration. We're relying entirely on the extensive source materials gathered, focusing on the timeline, the evidence, and, the final court outcomes.
Absolutely. When you approach a case like this, one that involves such a profound personal tragedy, it's just so important to move past the sensational headlines.
Right, and to focus on the meticulous process, the investigation, the prosecution. Our sources today, they really lay out a detailed roadmap of how law enforcement built what became an irrefutable case against Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail.
So we're going to trace that whole path.
The whole path. From Sydney Loofe's disappearance through the discovery of all the evidence, both digital and physical, and then finally to the very complex legal arguments and the convictions.
And our mission, really, in this exploration is to dissect that evidence. Not just what was found, but how it was pieced together. We want to understand precisely how investigators use technology. Cell tower data, surveillance video, store receipts, all of it.
How they used it to build a case that could stand up in court, especially when the suspect's stories were constantly shifting.
Constantly. And we want to be clear that we approach this subject with the utmost sensitivity and respect for Sydney Loofe. She was just a young woman pursuing her life when she disappeared.
So let's begin with the victim, Sydney Irene Loofe. She was born on August 21st, 1993 in Broken Bow, Nebraska, and she was only 24 years old at the time of her murder. I think it's just critical to start there to understand who she was.
That context, it really does show a young life in progress. The family moved to Neely around the year 2000, and she graduated from high school there back in 2011. The source material highlights her interests. She loved to fish, she played basketball and golf.
Until scoliosis, I read, in her teenage years. Yes, exactly. It curtailed her ability to continue with sports, which must have been difficult. At the time she went missing, she was working as a clerk at a Menards store in Lincoln, Nebraska.
The sources also reveal a crucial personal element, something that was happening right before her disappearance. Her mother, Susie Loofe, she testified about Sydney's struggles with anxiety and major depression.
It's an intensely tragic detail. Sydney had actually talked to her family about her worsening mental health just days before she went missing.
So she was reaching out for help.
Actively seeking it. In fact, the last time her family saw her alive, they had driven her to a doctor's appointment, specifically to get a prescription for antidepressants.
That just underscores everything, doesn't it? She wasn't running away or abandoning her life.
Quite the opposite. She was taking steps to stabilize her situation. She was fighting for herself.
And pursuing connection, which leads us directly into the timeline of November 2017. Sydney agreed to a date through the dating app Tinder with Bailey Boswell, who was using a fake alias, Audrey.
And that alias, Audrey, it's one of the first elements you see of calculated deception. But what stands out even more is Sydney's own instinct for safety.
What do you mean?
The source documents, the messages, they reveal she explicitly asked Boswell as Audrey twice if they would be the only people there on the date.
Twice. She wanted to be sure.
And Boswell confirmed both times that yes, they would be alone. This preemptive question, it just highlights her vigilance.
The vigilance that was tragically undermined by calculated lies.
Exactly.
So the first date happened, and it went well, which can often create, a false sense of security. She then went on the second date with Boswell on November 15th, 2017, right after leaving work.
And we know her last digital footprint was a Snapchat image, a picture of herself.
Simply caption, "Ready for my date."
A moment of optimism, really, just before everything went dark.
That second meeting was held at a basement apartment that Boswell and Trail had rented in Wilbur, Nebraska.
And that is where the digital trail for Sydney Loofe just terminates. It ends. Cell tower data confirmed the movement. You can see Boswell and Trail's phones traveling from the area around Sydney Loofe's home directly to Wilbur.
And Sydney's phone.
Her phone last pinged in Wilbur. And then it shut off completely at 8:32 p.m. that evening, November 15th, never to turn on again.
So by the next day, November 16th, her absence became alarming.
Very. She didn't show up for her shift at Menards.
Her mother, Susie, tried texting her, and when there was no response.
That's when she reported Sydney missing. The family knew something was wrong.
And a welfare check that police conducted at Sydney's home, it confirmed their worst fears, didn't it? Even though there were no immediate signs of a struggle.
Right. But the items left behind told the story. Her car was there, her glasses, her purse, All of it.
It pointed to an unplanned, immediate, and involuntary departure.
But the single most telling detail for me was the cat. Her cat had not been fed.
And that small detail, it's often the universal sign that someone didn't just decide to pack up and leave.
It really speaks volumes about the abruptness of what happened to her.
The investigation then quickly pivoted to that last known location, the rental in Wilbur. And once the police started talking to the property owners, some deeply alarming clues started to surface immediately. Clues that pointed toward a rushed, desperate attempt at a cleanup.
Indeed. The most critical clue came from the owner of the duplex that Boswell and Trail were renting. They reported a smell.
An extremely strong, overpowering odor of bleach coming from the basement area.
And this wasn't just, a general cleaning smell. This was described as something else entirely, something chemical.
And the sources go into detail about just how intense it was. It wasn't just unpleasant. The smell was so aggressive that a member of the owner's family had a physical reaction to it.
They began throwing up, developed hives.
That level of odor suggests a massive application of corrosive cleaning agents, far, far beyond anything you'd need for routine tidiness.
It strongly suggested an effort to neutralize and erase biological evidence, to destroy a crime scene.
Yeah. And adding to that suspicion was a strange environmental anomaly.
They were running an air conditioner.
In November. In Nebraska.
Right. It was cold. It made no sense. They were using extreme measures, both powerful chemicals and ventilation, to try and rapidly sanitize the area and disperse those fumes. It's a classic indicator.
So the police needed to connect Sydney to this specific location, and that link was provided by her vigilant friends.
Yes. Sydney had told her friend, Brooklyn McChrystal, about her date with the Tinder user Audrey.
And McChrystal's intervention was just absolutely vital to this case.
It was everything. After Sydney went missing, McChrystal took it upon herself to search through Tinder. She just kept swiping until she found the profile matching Audrey.
She swiped right, got a match.
And received a phone number she immediately turned over to the authorities.
That number was the direct bridge. It's what led them to Boswell and Trail.
Absolutely. With that phone number and the last cell phone ping data, police went straight to the Wilbur duplex. Within 48 hours, they confirmed it was the last location of Sydney Loofe's phone.
When they first got there, they used the landlord's key to enter. And the officers themselves, they immediately noticed that smell, that pervasive, pungent smell of bleach.
But here's an interesting investigative wrinkle. When they returned the next day with a full search warrant,
the basement had been cleaned again.
Even more thoroughly, it seems. Nothing physically out of the ordinary was found in plain view.
It just highlights the speed and, I guess, the apparent efficiency of the suspects in trying to destroy any and all evidence.
They were working fast. But despite that initial lack of physical evidence at the scene, the digital connection was already established. So by November 28th, Boswell and Trail were publicly named as persons of interest.
And the response to this public pressure was, well, it was audacious and immediate.
They chose to post a Facebook live stream video, which is highly unusual for suspects in a major criminal investigation.
In the video, they maintained their innocence. They tried to create this whole alternate narrative.
Boswell did most of the talking. She claimed the dates were innocent, just driving around, smoking some cannabis, and she adamantly asserted that after the second date, she dropped Sydney off at a friend's home, and that was the last she saw of her.
A story that we now know was a complete fabrication.
A total lie. And Aubrey Trail was right there, too. You can hear him in the background of the video praying that Sydney would be found safe soon.
This manufactured appearance of concern, it didn't slow down the investigation or their own attempts to flee.
No. 2 days later, November 30th, the pair were arrested in Branson, Missouri, at a motel.
And the initial arrest wasn't even for the murder, was it?
No, it was on unrelated fraud charges. They were already on the run for other crimes. But what investigators found when they arrested them suggested they were planning a much more permanent escape.
They had maps, sleeping bags, hiking shoes.
Exactly. The investigators concluded they were likely planning to cross the border into Mexico.
So not only were they lying publicly about their involvement, but they were actively engaged in a complex plan to flee the country. That just speaks volumes about their level of coordination and, their guilt. Now we have to shift our focus to the cold, hard evidence. The evidence that systematically dismantled all their claims of innocence, all the claims of accidental death. But before we get into that timeline of purchases, let's just quickly frame the suspects' backgrounds again, because their histories became central to the defense's strategy later on.
Absolutely. Bailey Boswell, she grew up in Leon, Iowa. She was actually an excelling athlete, had a college basketball scholarship offer. But her life was derailed by substance abuse
Uh-huh.
and significant personal trauma.
The sources document a history of abuse, right, in a previous marriage.
Yes, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And this history of vulnerability and trauma was later used by her defense team to claim she was susceptible to Trail's manipulation. The prosecution also noted her initial contact with Trail was through the now-defunct sex marketplace Backpage, where she was allegedly looking for a, quote, sugar daddy.
And Aubrey Trail's background was one of extreme instability from the very beginning.
Horrifically so. He was abused by his parents at age 2, spent his youth moving between poverty, foster homes, juvenile facilities.
And his criminal trajectory started very early.
He was in prison by age 17 for armed robbery. This history established a pattern of serious criminality long before he ever met Bailey Boswell or Sydney Loofe.
And it's so crucial to understand these backgrounds because the prosecution's case argued that this was not some spontaneous crime.
Not at all. It was a premeditated, coordinated effort driven by their criminal personalities. And the evidence timeline, drawn from surveillance footage and store receipts, proves that preparation.
There is even some indication of prior activity before the dates. Hotel clerks from a place in Falls City testified that they had seen a woman who could have been Sydney with the pair weeks before she disappeared.
Right, though that specific detail was never definitively proven to be Sydney. The concrete, provable timeline really starts on November 14th. That was the day of the first date. Surveillance cameras recorded Boswell and Trail checking into a Best Western hotel in Lincoln at 4 p.m.
And that location was strategically chosen. It was near the Menards where Sydney worked.
Suggesting they were already positioning themselves, already surveilling her.
And then the day of the murder, November 15th, it shows them actively acquiring the tools they would need. At 11:30 in the morning, they went shopping at a place called Aardvark Antique Mall.
And their purchases were, well, they were a folding saw, a weeder, and food grinders.
Items that might seem innocuous on their own, but the prosecution later argued the saw and weeder were intended for dismemberment. The food grinders, potentially, for pulverizing evidence.
And this is where the surveillance became truly chilling. Around midday on the 15th, cell tower data placed the suspect's phones waiting near Sydney Loofe's home.
And then following her.
Following her route to Menards, confirming they were stalking her movements before the planned date.
Trail himself was captured on the Menards surveillance video at noon. Just before Sydney exited the store, he was seen looking over his shoulder right at her.
And then he purchased a very bizarre combination of items. The receipt showed an air freshener, cotton cord, Drano protein bars, the thermometer, and lighters.
The cotton cord and the Drano, they really stand out. Tools for strangulation and for chemical cleanup.
But the truly damning preparation, the most undeniable proof of intent, happened while Sydney was still on the clock at work that afternoon.
Home Depot surveillance tapes. They showed the duo making purchases that just scream intent.
A foot-long hacksaw, wire snips, drop cloths, and a sharp utility knife with backup blades.
When you put the hacksaw and the utility knife with backup blades together, the purpose is just undeniable. It points directly to the conspiracy charge.
This detail is pivotal. They bought the tools for dismemberment before the second date even began, while Sydney was still alive and working her shift.
That is the very definition of premeditation.
Exactly. And the cleaning supply purchases, they just reinforced this timeline of planned evidence destruction. Surveillance recorded them buying a tree saw, 30-gallon trash bags, and multiple gallons of Clorox bleach.
And not just once.
Both before and after the murder.
Let's break down those receipts because they are so important. Clorox and hefty bags were bought from a Dollar General a few hours before the second date.
Right. Then, on November 16th, the day after the murder, another receipt showed Boswell buying Drano from a Dollar General.
She also bought additional bleach, bags, and a trash bin from a grocery store in Wilbur. The sheer volume of bleach and trash bags they purchased is just staggering.
And the prosecution, they didn't just rely on the existence of these receipts. They used them forensically.
How so?
A manager from Dollar General testified, confirming that the specific barcodes for the bleach and the 30-gallon plastic bags found near Sydney Loofe's remains. They matched the barcodes on the receipts recovered from the suspects.
It created an irrefutable paper trail.
A direct line connecting their wallets, their movements, and the disposal site.
And the digital record then follows that cleanup effort. After these purchases, the cell tower data, tracked their phones.
traveling to and from the remote area where Sydney's remains were eventually found.
And we need to talk about the precision of that cell data. In a case like this, the prosecution likely used what's called historical cell site analysis.
Right, they triangulate the phone's positions based on which towers they connect to and how strong the signal is. This data proved they took the exact route toward Edgar, Nebraska, which is about an hour west of Wilbur. And they spent time in that remote area off a gravel road.
And the timing corresponded precisely with their post-murder cleanup shopping spree.
It was a perfect match.
Which brings us to the grim discovery. Search teams, including the FBI, located Sydney Loofe's severed remains on December 4th and 5th, 2017.
The remains were found wrapped inside multiple 30-gallon black trash bags, just left along that gravel road north of Edgar. Along with the body parts, investigators also found sex toys and apparel.
The specific and horrifying detail here is that part of Sydney Loofe's upper arm has never been located.
And the slow emergence of evidence continued for months. 3 months later, investigators found her slip bra and the shirt she was wearing in her final Snapchat image.
Further confirming her identity and the violence she suffered.
And finally, there was the disposal of her personal items. Trail and Boswell tried to eliminate her digital identity by tossing her smartphone, her driver's license, and credit card out of a car window.
Police eventually located those items at Wilbur's Czech Cemetery, which closed the loop on their movements right after the crime.
The collective evidence, the receipts, the cell data, the surveillance, the items found, it just made their escape attempts and their denials utterly meaningless.
The physical and the digital evidence, it created a devastating, unassailable timeline. And yet the suspects, Aubrey Trail in particular, seemed determined to just muddy the waters with this constantly evolving stream of confessions and recantations. Let's try and trace this dizzying path of lies.
Trail started out seemingly contrite, if wildly dramatic. His initial statement from jail was a full confession. He claimed he acted alone in killing Sydney.
He even requested to be executed.
Yes, citing the law of retaliation. This was a clear attempt to take sole responsibility, presumably to protect Boswell.
But that straightforward confession didn't last very long, did it? His narrative immediately began to shift, challenging the core timeline that the police had established.
Exactly. His second confession alleged that Sydney died following a third date with Boswell on November 16th.
Which contradicted the cell phone data.
Completely. The data clearly showed Sydney's phone going dark on the evening of the 15th. This was the start of his attempt to manipulate the established facts.
And then came the key defense strategy, the sexual fantasy gone wrong.
Right. In his third confession, Trail claimed the trio was involved in a choking-based sexual fantasy that led to Sydney's accidental death. He maintained he accidentally choked her.
He expanded on this, didn't he, in an interview with the FBI?
He did. He gave this shocking interview where he claimed his job was making movies for special kinds of kinks. He asserted that he paid subjects like Sydney, who consented to these risky scenarios, knowing the risk of death from a choking kink.
He even claimed he had a recording of her consenting to be strangled.
A claim he later recanted, along with the entire threesome/sexual fantasy story. But he did continue to maintain the core idea that her death was accidental choking.
And court documents ultimately confirmed the method. He used pieces of electric wire to strangle her.
The defense's strategy hinged entirely on this idea that it was an accidental homicide during consensual rough sex.
But the physical evidence, the hacksaw, the meticulous dismemberment, the bleach, the disposal, it just fundamentally contradicted the idea of a tragic accident.
An accident does not involve premeditated dismemberment tools purchased hours before the event. It just doesn't.
And the prosecution had powerful evidence that suggested a motive far darker than a sexual fantasy gone awry, a motive rooted in profit.
And this was the conspiracy element. 3 separate women testified against Boswell and Trail.
What did they say?
They alleged that the pair had expressed detailed desires to record victims as they tortured and killed them, with a plan to sell these snuff sex videos for millions of dollars.
And that testimony provided the necessary motive for the premeditation charge. This was a calculated attempt at profit, not a sexual accident.
Exactly.
So, while the digital paper trail was perfect, the forensic DNA evidence did present some challenges for the prosecution, right?
It did. They couldn't locate the primary cutting tools like the hacksaw. And Sydney Loofe's DNA was not found on several analyzed items like handcuffs, a rope, a dog collar, or sex toys that were found in the apartment.
And this is a crucial point about forensic limitations. The absence of DNA isn't necessarily proof that those items weren't used.
Absolutely not. Given the overwhelming amount of bleach that was used in the clear attempt to sanitize the scene, bleach is a powerful DNA denaturant. It's highly effective at destroying biological evidence.
And the time delay between the murder and the forensic search also allows for degradation and cleaning.
Right. But the flip side is that Loofe's blood was found on some apparel.
Yes, her blood was positively located on a rubber glove and a pair of pants, and those pants were possibly stained with bleach.
Now, while poor quality latent prints meant the items couldn't be definitively traced back to Boswell or Trail, the presence of the victim's blood on items related to the cleanup process. It corroborated the violence and the subsequent frantic attempts to sanitize the scene and dispose of evidence.
The ultimate nail in the coffin, though, for the defense's shifting narratives, it came from the jail itself.
The coded letters.
The coded letters trail sent to Boswell while they were both incarcerated. This is some truly sensational evidence that proved the conspiracy.
These letters were extraordinarily damning because they established control and they established coordination. Trail wrote to Boswell giving her explicit instructions on what story she should tell the court.
The story being that he would take full responsibility.
Yes, and that she was to maintain she was a forced, coerced participant, a victim herself.
How were those letters even deciphered? They must have been intended to be secret?
Law enforcement and the FBI, they have protocols for this. They look for patterns, shifts in common vocabulary, substitution ciphers. Once the code was broken, the contents were explosive.
Beyond the instructions for her testimony.
The letters contained Trail's internal thoughts. They detailed his plans to make money from snuff sex films. And crucially, he admitted he had lied about the initial intention for no one to get hurt.
That admission just completely demolished the accidental choking defense.
And confirmed the premeditation of a conspiracy for profit. There was no going back from that.
So the defense attorneys, they had to work with this reality. Overwhelming physical evidence of planning, combined with their own client's written admission of coordinating lies and a profit motive.
Their strategy had to be focused solely on avoiding capital punishment. That became the common goal.
Both public defenders focused heavily on mitigating circumstances, the troubled childhoods of their clients.
Trail's attorney emphasized his history of poverty and abuse. Boswell's attorney emphasized her history of trauma, arguing she was emotionally manipulated by Trail, who was twice her age.
And Trail's attorney really pushed that kinks gone wrong theory. They even tried to introduce evidence found in Sydney Loofe's iCloud memes depicting choking and rough sex to suggest she sought out such fantasies.
A clear attempt at victim blaming, designed to muddy the waters and reduce the charge from premeditated murder to something lesser.
The prosecution, of course, countered that the victim's personal preferences, whatever they were, had nothing to do with the fact that Trail and Boswell bought a hacksaw and wire snips hours before the date.
Exactly. Boswell's defense, focusing on her being coerced and vulnerable, was likely more effective in the long run, as we'll see. It created a clear distinction between the two defendants in the eyes of the law.
The legal proceedings began formally in June of 2018. Both were charged with first-degree murder and improper disposal of human remains.
And conspiracy to commit murder was added later, reflecting the investigative findings of all that premeditation. Both initially pled not guilty.
The stakes were incredibly high from the very start. Prosecutors quickly announced their plans to seek capital punishment for both Boswell and Trail.
It signaled their view that this was a crime of the highest depravity.
Aubrey Trail's path through the court was volatile, to say the least. In June 2019, he pled guilty only to the improper disposal of remains charge,
forcing the state to prove the murder and conspiracy charges at trial.
And his trial contained significant, bizarre drama.
It did? At one point, a frustrated Trail lashed out in court. He proclaimed Boswell's innocence, and then, in a shocking moment, he cut his own neck with what appeared to be a razor blade.
He subsequently missed a portion of the trial after that, refusing to appear.
That's right.
Was that outburst interpreted as a genuine breakdown? Or was it viewed as some kind of attempt to influence the jury or, garner sympathy for Boswell? He was still clinging to that idea of protecting her.
It's a highly debated point. But regardless of his internal motivation, the consensus was that his actions were disruptive and likely did not help his case. The jury was already presented with evidence of a calculating, manipulative individual from the jail letters and the testimony about the snuff film plan. Such erratic, violent behavior in court probably just reinforced the prosecution's narrative that he was dangerous and unstable.
And Boswell's trial faced its own procedural complexities. She was granted a change of venue due to the extreme public prejudice the case had generated in Nebraska.
Right, and later a judge had to recuse herself from the sentencing phase due to her involvement in the state's execution protocol implementation. It just highlights the severity and sensitivity of capital cases in Nebraska.
But despite all the drama and the procedural hurdles, the evidence was conclusive. Aubrey Trail's verdict came swiftly in July 2019.
The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before convicting him on all major counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains.
His request for a new trial was firmly rejected.
It was. And his sentencing, 2 years later in June of 2021, finalized his fate. A 3-judge panel unanimously agreed to sentence Aubrey Trail to death.
He's currently held on death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution.
Bailey Boswell's trial concluded in October 2020 with the same result. A jury convicted her of murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains.
However, her sentencing, which was delivered in November 2021, resulted in a vastly different outcome: life in prison. And this is a critical legal distinction we have to explore. Why the difference? They were convicted of the same core charges.
The difference lies in Nebraska's specific standard for capital punishment. The panel of 3 judges, they must find aggravating circumstances that meet the standard of exceptional depravity.
And they didn't find that with her.
While Boswell was found guilty of conspiracy and murder, one of the 3 judges opined that her actions did not meet that specific standard of exceptional depravity required to impose the death penalty.
So that decision gave some credence to the defense's strategy.
It did. The idea that she was, at least to some degree, manipulated or coerced by the older career criminal Trail. Her sentence was mitigated by that distinction, and that's why she received a life sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women.
It's just a stark example of how the legal definition of culpability, even in a joint crime, can lead to massively different sentences.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that while this case dominated the headlines, both Boswell and Trail were also convicted in an unrelated case involving large-scale fraud.
The coin buyers case.
Right. They defrauded hundreds of thousands of dollars from interstate coin buyers. It just confirmed their established pattern of coordinated large-scale criminal behavior well before the murder of Sydney Loofe.
Our exploration has really meticulously chronicled the facts, the evidence, and the legal journey that led to these convictions. And while the legal resolutions offer closure for the state, the enduring memory of Sydney Loofe is what truly remains.
The community response was just immense. The Facebook page that was created during the search, Finding Sydney Loofe, it quickly gained over 30,000 followers. It highlights the profound impact her disappearance had on the entire region.
And that page, it serves as a powerful symbol of transformation now. It's been renamed Celebrating Sydney Loofe, shifting the focus from the tragedy of her loss to, the appreciation of her life and her memory.
And another proactive legacy is the scholarship that was established in her name.
The Set Me Free Project.
Yes, an anti-trafficking nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
They dedicated a $3,000 scholarship in Sydney's honor. And this scholarship is so critically important because it supports students who are pursuing careers directly aimed at prevention, criminology, online safety, social work.
It turns a horrific event into motivation for future public safety professionals.
Exactly.
Reflecting on the entire arc of this case, what truly stands out is the most powerful strategic element for the prosecution, especially considering how chaotic and contradictory Aubrey Trail's multiple confessions were.
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer resilience and the strategic deployment of the objective evidence, specifically the technological record. The defense was trying to create reasonable doubt using human fallibility. Accidents, memory lapses, coercion, shifting stories. The prosecution countered all of that with irrefutable machine data.
They didn't need to convince the jury that the suspects were lying.
Because the cell pings, the surveillance videos, and the barcoded receipts did that work for them automatically.
It's the difference between a flawed verbal testimony and a perfect, silent digital ledger of events.
Exactly. The evidence of planning, buying the hacksaw hours before the date, that couldn't be lied away. The travel path to the disposal site couldn't be denied because the phone tower data placed their devices there, period. The successful prosecution, it highlights an irreversible truth about modern criminal investigation.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider as we conclude our examination. In the Sydney Loofe case, the confluence of digital evidence, the cell pings, the surveillance footage, the detailed purchase receipts. It created an irrefutable narrative in court. It effectively drowned out the noise of the defense's ever-changing stories. What does this tell us about the hidden, objective record of our daily lives and the extent to which our every move, our every purchase, and every communication is logged, ready to be reconstructed should the truth ever need to be uncovered? It's a sobering thought about the true visibility of our existence in the modern world.